Welcome in, guys. Thank you all for joining us. This is the episode of the Birth Team Talks where we are going to discuss the importance of nutrition with our special guest, Sister Sharifa Kiyama Muhammad. Let's give a round of applause for her in the comments. If you guys are joining us, let us know that you're here. I'll start by actually reading our mission statement here for Explore the Motherhood. Our mission is to reduce the rate of infant and maternal mortality in the African American community by establishing community and connection with families from their birth team before, during, and after pregnancy. We acknowledge that this can't be done without educating mothers, and we intend to do just that. A little bit about myself. I'm a doctor of pharmacy, a natural birth and breastfeeding advocate. I'm a mother of three, and I've had one birth in the birth, one assisted home birth, and one unassisted home birth. I love showing mothers just how spectacular their birth experience can be. And so that's why we are doing this episode and series. A little bit about Sister Sharifa. Let's start. Okay, Sister Sharifa Kiyama Muhammad is a student and the member of the Nation of Islam under the teachings of Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, as taught by the the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. She is a dedicated wife, mother, and entrepreneur. She is the co-founder of Powder Power, and an all-natural, all-purpose body powder business. Her personal business is called New Day Services, where she practices as a nutritional lifestyle consultant, using How to Eat to Live as taught by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad as a foundational approach to help her clients achieve optimal health and wellness from a holistic approach. She is also a QRA, quantum reflex analysis practitioner, a method of muscle testing that further helps her clients to better understand nutritional needs. And if you are looking to access some of her businesses, she does have a website for Powder Power. That's powderpower.co. You can also find that on Instagram, Your Powder Power, and her personal Instagram is Sister Sharifa, and her Facebook is Sharifa.Muhammad. If you guys want to reach her, guys. So we're gonna get started. Would you like to say any opening remarks?
Well, absolutely, yes, ma'am. I always like to start off in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Merciful. I bear witness there's no God but Allah, and I bear witness that Muhammad is his messenger. And I just want to thank you so much for inviting me to the Birth Team Talks. When you first reached out, I was like, oh, Allah, like, gotta do this. Because I just love it when, like you said, just the mission statement that you have to help our people, in particular our sisters, to better understand the importance of proper nutrition and proper, really just proper balance for life and longevity, not just for pregnancy, but even beyond, which I know we'll talk about today. But I also want to give thanks to the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad for giving us these teachings that, inshallah, I'll be blessed to share with you all today, because were it not for that, I would have nothing to say today. So, of course, that is, like, as you read in my bio, that is the perspective, that is the foundation that I'll be coming from. And I'm just really looking forward to our conversation.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you for accepting my invite. And if you guys don't know, I've known Sister Sharifa since I joined the Nation of Islam. And so that's been over 10 years. And she was very instrumental in me having my first daughter. I don't know if she remembers, but I went through a period of not being able to conceive, I guess I should say. And then also having long menstrual cycles. And it was Sister Sharifa who got me back aligned. So praise be to Allah for her. And I'm so thankful that she accepted this invite to join us and talk about nutrition from a holistic approach, if we should say. Okay, so let's dive right on in, guys. And if you have any questions, definitely comment so we can see them on the screen, guys. We do want you guys to be as interactive as possible, just so that we know you're here and you're actually gaining something from this experience. Okay, let's see. So what role does systemic inequity, such as food deserts and lack of access to quality prenatal care, play in nutrition related disparities for Black mothers and infants?
Okay, well, for sure, that definitely does play a very, very huge role, especially when we don't have the knowledge of how to navigate, that type of, we can, I guess, use the term of deficiency. Like you mentioned, food deserts is a big problem. Knowing what to eat, even in these little small mom and pop stores, because they're going to sell us whatever the cheapest thing is that we can get access to, and we'll take that because that's what's there. But once again, going back, to the teachings of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, and of course, I couldn't start talking without showing these books, How to Eat to Live. For background, for those who may not be familiar with the books, whether you're on the call live today or you're listening to the replay, How to Eat to Live is a compilation of articles written by the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad between the 1930s, 1950s. And now these articles have been put in book form. So these articles, which this book was published around the 1960s, if I'm not mistaken, like 1967. And what we find is a lot of the advice and information that is given in these two books, which also, too, if you notice from the top, it says from God in person, which you don't see any book out there talking about sustaining our lives and our health that has from God in person at the top. But saying that all to say was, one of the interesting benefits of the fact that this book was written during that time frame, of course, during that time frame, especially for Black people, we were very poor.
Yes.
So some of the food options given in here are geared towards, as today we will say, the low economic status or the underserved community. So we have solutions in this book that fit right for 2025, that even though we may live in food deserts, just the basic simple foods that he gives us, it still gives us that opportunity to overcome that challenge by having nutrient dense foods introduced into our lives, or nutrient dense food staples, really, because that's what they are. And in saying that, when we look at How to Eat to Live, there are three basic foods that the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad gives us in here that he says that will help to sustain our lives, to start us off to live at least by 100 years old. And even for our children, he says if we start them off on the navy bean, I want to quote him correctly, so just give me one moment. But on page 9 in book 1, he says, quote, and he's talking about Master Fard Muhammad, he said that he could take one of our babies and start him off eating the dry, small navy bean soup and make that child live 240 years. So, right. Of course, beans are not very expensive, which is great. The navy bean in particular is the one about here. That in and of itself is a food that has fats, it has proteins, it has carbohydrates. And it's something that even though we may live in a food desert, we can get access to. So knowing how to properly prepare it will put us in a, I don't want to say in a situation, but it will put us in put us in a situation where we can kind of somewhat overcome that challenge. But then too, the other two main foods that are talked about heavily in that book, which of course are very debatable and controversial foods in this day and time, is the pure whole milk and the pure whole wheat bread. And I'll bring those back up later on as we go through further discussions. So saying that to say, even though we're at a disadvantage when it comes to, the socioeconomics, the location and what have you, there's still an option to overcome that. Now, of course, growing our own food becomes very important. One of the things that I have seen, because we have been out in the community to different complexes, where our people are, quote, underserved. Now we're finding, I guess what's the term I'm using there, like urban farms. There you go. Right. We have some urban farms in some of our areas. And so now our people are able to take advantage of areas like that, so we can get fresh, whole foods. But overall, that as a dilemma, it shows that as a people, we really have to come together, and we're going to have to start growing our own food as well to help, overcome those types of disparities.
Yes, ma'am, absolutely. So you did talk about the impact that poor diet has had on us. How does that actually impact fertility for moms or even the husbands or men, spouses or partners? What are those specific dietary habits that support conception, basically?
Okay. So, starting with the first part of that question, because I even think about, I got another quote, and I'll come back to that quote. And this one comes from How to Give Birth from a God. Now, of course, I got to give visuals. So, How to Give Birth to a God is a lecture series that the Honorable Mr. Louis Farrakhan did in the 1980s, 1987 to be more specific. And in there, he gives the backdrop of the importance of both male and female in the proper preparation for conception so that we can bring or birth into the world really the solution to our problems. And I guess that leads me into the quote that I'll share that I did put together for this call. This one comes from How to Give Birth to a God Part 2, where the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan says, quote, he says, because when you look at the condition of the world and the condition of our people, you must think, how is it going to be solved? I must produce something from my womb to make a change in the world, male or female. It doesn't make any difference. Women do this work too. Now, how does this happen? How do you do it? First, you prepare, clean yourself up. Same way with men. You must clean yourself up, brother, because the sperm that you have, which represents the future of your life, that's a sacred thing, but you're poisoning it. Every time you drop alcohol, cigarettes, dope into yourself, it's reflected in your sperm. If you take dope, they can take a sample of your urine and they see it in your urine. Well, if it's in the urinary tract, it gets into the blood. If it gets into the blood, it gets into the sperm. Same thing with the egg and the uterus. Sorry, that was off quote. Let me get back on quote. So you're killing your future. You clean up, come under the divine law of God, begin thinking on a higher level. I want to produce a child that will help turn this world around. It's the womb of the woman that's going to produce it. End quote. So in reading that quote, that just exemplifies the importance of, definitely the things we should not be putting into the body, but also how important it is of what we introduce into the body. And not only doing that, but when. Because a lot of times that question becomes, well, when should I start preparing? I hope I'm not jumping ahead of your questions.
No, ma'am.
Okay,
no.
Good. So the when is very important as well, because a lot of times we think, I want to have a baby now, I need to start eating right.
Right.
No. From the moment, right? Go ahead, sis.
It should be before, right?
Right. It should be way before that. And so the question really becomes, well, when should it be? And the truth of the matter is, it should start when we come into knowledge of self.
Yes.
So that doesn't matter what the age. There's no age limit to that, because when we come into knowledge of self and who we are, then we're going to want to do better by ourselves. Right. And not even just coming into the knowledge of self, but also coming into the knowledge of our own personal purpose in life, because that becomes the motivation to want to sustain my life, because I want to be able to feel my purpose and enjoy the joy and, that comes along with that. So you could be 10 years old, you could be 5, but of course, a big portion that's going to deal is going to pertain to the parent and what she's feeding the child. But children are smart enough; they know. They be like, "I don't want to eat that."
That's so true. Elia, she's somewhere, and she's like, "Oh no, my brother doesn't eat that," or we don't eat that. She's 7,
right.
but she turned 8. So you're right; they do know at an early age.
Voila. They know. And sometimes they know because they've been taught, and sometimes they know because they experience what it's like to eat something they had no business eating.
Correct.
So, that goes back to that preparation starts for a lot of us from birth, but most importantly for those of us when we come into the knowledge of ourselves, and especially when we come into our purpose, then that builds up the desire to want to be healthy, to want to live, because we want to be found experiencing that joy of what it truly means to live in our purpose, or really enjoy what true happiness really is. Um, so in saying that, you talked about the foods that help to improve or, increase fertility. But before I get into that, I still want to kind of tie back into what the minister said or what I read from that quote about putting the dope out, putting the cigarettes, putting the alcohol, because a lot of times that's what we don't want to conceive. So I got to stop drinking. I got to stop smoking. I got to cut out the caffeine. Some of these are things that we decide that we're going to do. But in truth, those are things we shouldn't have been putting into our bodies from the get-go, from the beginning. And so what we have to understand, and when we do that, because this is one of the biggest culprits, if you will, that hampers or hinders fertility, is a congested liver. Okay. Liver. And I have to go there simply because, like I said, when the liver is toxic, or let me start with the function of the liver, because I always like to talk about the function of something so we get a better understanding. But one of the main functions of the liver is it is our master detoxifier. Okay. And so when the liver is backed up and congested like that, it makes it easier for toxins to flow in the bloodstream and affect different parts of the body. The other thing liver that makes it very unique as it relates to fertility is that it's also a master hormone regulator. So if it's toxic, if it's congested, we can't the metabolism of the hormones that are required to even undergo proper fertilization becomes impaired. So that's one of the things that we have to start on in terms of that cleaning up process. Get all this gunk out of my liver. Because we can put in the foods that are necessary for fertility, but if the liver is, compromised, you're not going to get much benefit. So we have to open up that channel, open up those airways, as we would say. So starting there, I know in the naturopathic realm or the more holistic realm, some of the things that we recommend for people are citrus fruits, because they're good. They help to detoxify the liver and the gallbladder. Herbs like dandelion. Dandelion is a very popular one that people can find in your average grocery store. Milk thistle is also another one. Milk thistle more so works on the internal component of the liver itself, and dandelion works on the general external portion. So they go well hand in hand. And once someone starts to address the liver and give it a clear pathway, now you want to look into foods and, of course, also the nutrients that those foods provide. But even before we jump into an actual food item, vitamin D. Because, even though it has the term vitamin in front of it, people mistake it as a vitamin, but its function is more so as a hormone. Yes. And with the clients that I've worked with over these past years, I have yet to come across one who I met who had optimum vitamin D levels. Okay. Wow. And we know we can get vitamin D from the sun. That's our best source to get it from if we're out in the sun. But of course, living in this modern, technologically advanced world, a lot of us are allergic to being outside. Literally. So supplementing with vitamin D becomes a necessary option in those cases. I always like to share with people what vitamin D levels should look like. Yes. On average nowadays on the blood test, they are raising the numbers, which is good, but it's still not optimal. So most times when I see people's blood work on their forms, when they put the ranges, it'll say 10 to 30 NGs per DL or ML. But 10 to 30 is too low. Yes, if you want to get to a point to where you're optimal and you want to increase chances of fertility or fertilization, you want it to be between 60 to 80 and really at 60 to 100. But let's just say 60 to 80. Okay. And like I said, most people I've looked at their blood work is usually under 30. Okay. So that's one place to start. Now, also 2 food sources of vitamin D. Of course, they put it, they fortify orange juice, they fortify milk. But when we go to pure whole milk, as we're taught in How to Eat to Live, it has a natural source of vitamin D. Eggs have a source of vitamin D. So, those are some food items that one can eat that will also help to increase those levels. Now we get into foods per se. Things like, dates, for those who may like dates, because dates do function as a hormonal regulator. The beautiful thing about dates is beyond the fact that they help to balance hormones is that what did I want to say about them? They provide certain nutrients as well that help prepare for fertility, such as iron and vitamin B6 and magnesium. Okra is a good one. We're talking about foods here. Okra too is a good hormone regulator. More so when people soak it in water and drink the water, but definitely eating it on a regular basis. Now, of course, some of these foods people don't want to eat every day, and that's fine. So what you want to do is, because we're talking about lifestyle, you just make sure you have it in the rotation. Okra is a hormone regulator in the sense that one of the things that it does, most people are familiar with who use it. They use it for symptoms for menopause. But because it is a hormone regulator, you still get the added benefits as it relates to fertility. But it's high in calcium. So it's great. It's great for the bones. So, that's another reason to want to add something like that into the diet. I'm thinking of foods because I can roll off some herbs for you right off the bat. Beets, people are like, but beets are high in nitric oxide, which helps to oxygenate. So it's good for the womb because it helps to oxygenate that area for expansion and preparation for implantation. Same thing for males. It's great for them because it helps with that blood flow to get that sperm motility up, and hopefully in getting that sperm motility up, eventually it also affects sperm quality. So that's another good one to have. But also too, when you look at the nutrition for it, it's high in iron. And other nutrients, which we'll probably get to. Now, put into a few herbs or oils, evening primrose oil. I know I recommend that one a lot to clients. It too is a hormone regulator, hormone balancer. It doesn't anything hormonal related. That one is great for, period. So whether it's fertility, whether it's menopause, whether it's PMS, it's just one of those type of oils that really helps to do that because it has a higher progesterone content. But that's not just that alone. It has all this other biochemical factors that work synergistically so that it can fit whatever particular condition we're dealing with. Raspberry leaf tea. That's a very common one. Not only is it good for preconception, but it's also great for pregnancy itself and afterwards. Red clover, that's another herb. Red clover is an excellent blood cleanser. So it's great, especially for males, of course, females as well. And it's used in so many things in particular. It's usually used as a base in cancer treatments. But because it is a blood cleanser, it fits in that category also for improving fertility rate. Maca root. I don't know how many people are familiar with maca. Now, normally, but it. What'd you say?
It can get a little dangerous, huh?
Right.
What I mean?
Yeah, I'm tearing it. It get maca. You gotta, that's one of them. You don't just outright just tell people to try. You gotta. That's what you gotta tiptoe play around with because while it does help influence fertility, it is an adaptogenic herb, so it helps with stress. See, that's another thing too that needs to be addressed when fertility, improving fertility, is we have to address what our stresses are, what is stressing us out. But it also heavily increases libido.
Yes.
I had a client, she was taking it, she wasn't taking it for libido, but she's like, it's working. She said, but it's making me feel kind of ways. So it was like, okay, well, let's find you something else. Ashwagandha too. That one fits in that category. It's not as strong as maca, but maca is a if you want to hit, it's gonna do that. But ashwagandha can do the same thing. It too is adaptogenic. It is great for energy levels. It's great for workouts, but also too, like I said, when it comes to that fertility piece, it from the reducing or the reduction of the stress standpoint, that's one way that it helps to build up fertility. So that's a few off the the top of my head that I could share.
Yes, ma'am. And I had a comment, and then so you talked about, we're going to the next question, where you talked about growing your own food. Like if you don't have access to nutrition, and if you live in a food desert, growing your own food would be like an accessible nutrition strategy that you would recommend to families who may not have consistent access to those fresh and healthy foods during pregnancy and postpartum. So, what other ways would be a practical way for them to access some of these things? You talked about whole milk and bread being, or eggs actually, and milk being a vitamin D source for moms. So something like WIC, would you recommend that to moms who may have limited access to these options, I should say?
Oh, absolutely. Yes, ma'am. And that's a great question because if unless it's changed with WIC
Mm,
targets specifically to foods, right?
correct.
Okay.
Yes.
So yes, ma'am. Absolutely. And when we see with WIC, that don't mean I have to go shopping at, I'm not gonna throw no names out there, but
Right. Yes.
a low budget grocery store,
Right.
with WIC, you can go to a more, I guess, well developed market. I mean,
Yes.
Walmart. I'm throwing names out there. I mean, people can go to Walmart, but Walmart doesn't really provide like really good quality, nutritionally dense foods in the area of what we're discussing, like your eggs, your milk. You
Mhm.
may be able to find some pasture raised eggs at Walmart. I know they're trying to come up a little bit, but I hadn't really, scourged the aisles as much. But like a HEB or Kroger, depending on the location and where those are, people can definitely find those things on Sprouts, Whole Foods. You'll be better able to find maybe a good quality milk in a store like that versus the others. But when it comes to eggs nowadays, because pasture raised is becoming very popular, they're
Yeah.
easier to find. They're easier to get access to. So yes, that for sure. And then once again, like we talked about, if an urban farm nowadays, a lot of the urban farms are starting to sell eggs because they have chickens. Depending on where we live within the city of Houston city limits now, some people are actually starting to raise their own chickens, and
Right.
it's just really amazing to see that. But all of that, even when you mentioned me talking growing our own food in that bigger realm of things too, we really have to come together as a community, because it shouldn't be on one person to grow my whole 5-course meal, 4-course meal. If
Yeah.
I'm growing spinach and my neighbor's growing lettuce and this person's growing squash, then we could, because Allah, when he allows us to grow food like that, it grows in abundance. And what we find is we have more than we can handle. So
Yes.
that's when the camaraderie, the fellowship, the the what is it? It's a phrase they used to say about growing up in a village. That type of thing. That kind of really really helps to overcome that type of disparity when it comes to that. But yes, WIC for sure.
Mhm.
Sure could definitely help with that, especially when we have the knowledge of what we're looking for.
Before. Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am.
Mhm.
Absolutely. And I do know that I think WIC, you can get, like you said, those pasteurized egg, pasture raised eggs, excuse me. And then there's also, you can get organic. So
Mhm.
you can have like, this world, if next to growing your own food, the best thing would be the organic option in the stores,
Right.
right? So
Right.
you have access to that if you are um have limited access to foods with your own money as
Mhm.
well. And I do know that WIC is for women and children.
Mhm.
So
Mhm.
don't be afraid to use your WIC. So a lot of people have that stereotypical ideology like, oh, I don't want to use my WIC because somebody's going to see me using my WIC. You get a card, just put it in, and you guys will be fine. Just
Right. Yeah,
use
it's like people ain't looking out what kind of card you got.
it.
Shoot, nowadays they all look alike. And then
Right.
even I know this urban farmers market here off of Scott and Belford. Some of those accept WIC. And not only do they accept WIC, they have programs where they give you, like bonus points when you purchase, and so you and they stack up and you get something for free. I know they have it in particular only because we went through the explain to us how they're able to cater to the underserved community in that area. So these are things to take into consideration and for us to look into so that we can take advantage of them.
Yes, ma'am. Okay, so we are going to take a brief intermission. I hope that was stimulating for you guys and you learned something from that first portion, but we're going to just actually highlight a few moms that we have who have businesses. We actually are going to highlight some powerhouse mompreneurs and women-owned businesses from right here in the Explore Motherhood community. Sister Naima of Simply Nima Children, where she has products for our little people to master their creativity and learning, as well as Andrea Buxey of My Financial, where she empowers individuals and families to build, grow, and protect their wealth through personalized financial guidance and smart strategies. Their information is here on the screen, so definitely support, share, and shop if you would like to. So definitely let us know if you're interested in any of these. Their websites are there on the screen, so you can just take a snapshot or a screenshot of those, and then we're going to jump right back into the broadcast. And thank you guys for being with us. So let's see. My next question, I did have another question in regards to someone's question on the broadcast. I think it was Sister Lily. She said, when we decided to start eating right, how long do we wait until we try to conceive in and with a clean womb? So yeah, so basically after you come into knowledge of self and you're like, okay, I've been eating under the guidance of the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad, How to Eat to Live, and now I'm ready to conceive in my mind. What is the actual recommended? Is it 2 years or is it 3 years after you've been eating How to Eat to Live, or what is it?
That's a great question. That's a great question. To be honest, as far as How to Eat to Live in the book, the messenger doesn't give a time frame on that. I know what he does give time frames on, with the 1 meal a day. If you're getting used to eating 1 meal a day, within 30 days, you can move on, things like that. So really in situations like it really depends on the individual. Yes. It could depend on how they feel since they've been practicing, or if they want to be more specific and look into quantitative data, they can get blood work and see what the basic numbers are on their comprehensive blood analysis. So it just depends on the person, but that's an issue. Now, in all honesty, they say it takes 30 days to break a habit. Shoot, 90 days. Just give it 90 days and see how, like, okay, let's see if this. But if a person wants to wait longer than that, then go for it.
Since, like you said, try to see if the blood work has actually changed. If those essential vitamins that they may have needed to come up on, especially iron. Mentioned beets, they have some iron in them, and then
folate.
Yeah, folate. So yeah, so I guess wait and see what those levels would be, and then move on from there.
And then, of course, if people have conditions prior to wanting to become pregnant, they can use that as a benchmark. Okay, these symptoms have, dissipated. So okay, let me go get some blood work done and see now, because these things are improving since I've been practicing How to Eat to Live. Those are a lot of key signals that should be able to help.
I do have a question that's not on topic, but
okay,
for experience, from experience, actually, if you do have different things like gestational diabetes, and working with that to get your levels down, how does nutrition play a role in affecting those areas to where you are able to have a safe pregnancy, I should say?
Okay. I would say, okay, can you repeat that question one more time?
So basically, if you do have a condition like gestational diabetes, or preeclampsia, if you notice that you may have trouble with blood pressure and or blood sugar, what are some things that you can incorporate into your diet to manage those while pregnant?
Okay. Okay, gotcha. So great questions again. Now one thing, especially when you mentioned the gestational diabetes, and it depends who the practitioner is that the patient is working with and things like that. And that still goes back to blood work as well. Looking at that blood work, looking at what those minerals or vitamins may be deficient, because a lot of times, like preeclampsia, gestational diabetes, magnesium deficiency usually is one of the big culprits in that. So increasing the magnesium intake through foods, or sometimes through supplements, depending on the severity of the condition. Okay. I'm trying not to jump into your other question, so I'm gonna jump up off of that.
You already did. So.
I already did. Okay. But yes. So in situations like this, because not only that also was a telltale that there was something going on prior to conception, or there was some deficiency prior to conception that led into what's going on now. So, once we identify what the possible deficiencies are, that's one way to treat it. Of course, we could just straight go with whole foods. Once again, like beets, if the mother can tolerate that, because that's a great one too for helping to lower and stabilize blood pressure. They do have some magnesium in them. And then depending on, I guess, what the doctor gives the green light or the okay light for, as it relates to the pregnant mother, because there are certain herbal teas that are what we call nutritonics, or we call them tips. And pretty much what that means is their main role is just to provide nutrition. So you don't, a person doesn't have to worry about, is this going to affect my blood sugar, or is this going to affect my blood pressure and things like that, because they don't have those type of, I guess for lack of a better term, side effects, because their main goal is just to provide nutrition.
Yes.
Hibiscus can be that one, but before I would go to hibiscus, I would more so say hawthorn, because it's more neutral. But hawthorn,
okay,
hawthorn, and people can eat the berries, or they can drink the tea. But hawthorn is a nutritive type of herb, whether in the berry form in particular. So what I love about that one is, even though it helps with blood pressure, it also helps with improving the physical structure of the heart. But most people are familiar with hibiscus, as hibiscus. You hear hibiscus, oh, okay, blood pressure. So things like that can be done. Even that nettles is still good, because the nettles can act like a natural diuretic. And remember, we talked about that one earlier in terms of helping with the liver. But nettles is also a nutritive herb. So its main function is more so to provide nutrition. So it helps to provide iron. It's good for people dealing with iron deficiency as well. But it provides a broad range of minerals. Let's see. So you talked about blood. You talked about, the diabetes piece, which of course deals with blood sugar. So in a case like that, even in How to Eat to Live, whether a person's pregnant or not, the Honorable Elijah Muhammad recommends, if you're dealing with diabetes, just put the sugar out of your diet until it goes down. So when we're looking at foods, there are certain foods, of course, that have what they call that low glycemic index. Okay, so that's when a person wants to focus more so on the low glycemic ones, since we're dealing with pregnancy, because you have to get some kind of carbs in. So it needs to be the ones that aren't spiking the blood sugar, because this is a unique situation. Dates can fit in that category depending on the person, even though they taste really sweet. But what people can do is they can use what's called date sugar. So instead of the honey or things like that, the date sugar, really what date sugar is just dry dates that have been grounded. So the fiber is still in there. And that's one of the reasons why it's considered low glycemic. So you got the low glycemic benefit from it, but you still also have the hormonal regulating component of it, and you're still getting your iron. So it's just like a win-win when we understand how food works in its own unique synergistic way.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. And you talked about whole foods and supplementation. So can you share your perspective on whole foods versus supplements during pregnancy? Should one be prioritized over the other?
Well, for sure, whole food should always, and I'm not into the superlatives, but in this case, it should always be considered as a priority in the sense that that is where we're supposed to be getting our primary nutrition from. Society in the world that we live in today, most of the food has been devalued. It has been denatured. So if we are not growing our own food, going back to that, or we are not getting food from a source that we know is growing their food in a certain way, then supplementation does become necessary. And even in that word supplement, it can go in so many directions, because just looking at the word supplement itself, supplement just means it's adding to, or it's helping to push up whatever the main thing is. So it should never be the priority or the main focus anyway. It's just a supporting team member or the supporting cast. But nowadays, a lot of us look at supplements as the main attraction. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Okay. Ma'am. And then now when you look at that, not only as the word supplement itself, okay, now what am I talking about? Am I talking about whole food herbal supplementation, or am I talking about synthetic man-made?
Right.
Because a lot of times we don't take that into consideration. We just see the word supplement. Okay, like, oh, okay, let me go get this vitamin B supplement over here. And you look at it and it has all these man-made synthetic materials in it. And then when you go to the restroom, your urine is bright yellow. Like, okay, is that normal? Yeah, they call it expensive urine, but the reason it's expensive is because when we introduce synthetic things into the body, which are foreign, the body doesn't recognize it, so it's not able to utilize it in the maximum capacity that it should, and that's why the body excretes it. So, for example, you may see, and I know this, Doc. You may get a supplement and it has like 10,000. You're like, oh, good God, 10,000 doses of B6 or B12. Like, I don't need that much. But in truth, even though it's like 10,000, which is like a 200%, your body's only gonna use 10%. So you didn't have 190%. It's waste.
Yeah.
But you paying for it. But when you look at a whole food, praise be to Allah and his beautiful creation, and this is why, we should be so grateful and so thankful. He looked out ahead and said, you know what? You're going to need this B vitamin. I'm going to put this in this B pollen for you. But because B vitamins need magnesium, or they need this cofactor of zinc, or I need this, I'm going to put that in there too for you. So we'll consume something like that. And all the other, once again, those supporting cast members are there. So when you consume a higher amount of that, that may give you the same percent that was in that synthetic bottle. The urine's not yellow. Why? Because the body is like, oh, I recognize this. This is what we call bioavailable. So it absorbs it all.
Yes, ma'am.
And there you go with more optimal health.
Yes, ma'am. I'm glad that you said that about the supplementation, because like you said, majority of the supplementations that we do have synthetically derived, they actually have very poor bioavailability, very, very poor. So basically, like you said, they are expensive urine, basically. You're not getting it from them. So it is better to actually get your supplementation from your foods, your vitamins that you need from your foods. So let's go ahead and dive into our next question. And it's basically, how can naturopathic approaches, we actually kind of touched on this a little bit, but how can naturopathic approaches such as culturally relevant foods and traditional healing practices support maternal health in underserved Black communities?
Well, now, that can go several different ways. In particular, one, culturally and traditional foods, depending on what they are, because, as Black people, we have a culturally and traditional slave food diet. But when we read How to Eat to Live, we find that most of those foods we should not be eating anyway because of the detriment to our health. So I want to start there in the context of when we talk about cultural traditional foods for us, we're talking about the ones specifically that help to prolong life. Okay. So we're not talking about collard greens. We're not talking about cornbread. We're not talking about those belly buster lima beans, which the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad speaks about in How to Eat to Live. But the ones that, once again, like I said, that do help to sustain life, they're good to have because one is something that, as a people we're familiar with. So we're more likely to consume it because when we introduce new foods to the diet, if we're not familiar with it, we're not as likely to want to consume it because we might not like the texture. We might not like the taste, even though we know we may need it. So the benefit of having those, cultural traditional items. And, I'm talking about us as Black people. The slave diet is that's really not even our natural diet. That's the slave's diet. And we're not slaves anymore. So we have to come up out of that and say, okay, well, what are the traditional things? And what is the diet of the righteous?
Right.
I know what that is. Here we go right here. But so that, in and of itself will help. But then when you get into other cultures, yes, they have certain foods that nowadays that we like that are very beneficial to helping to solve a lot of the problems that we're dealing with. So yes, ma'am, we just have to make sure that we, because people say, hey, man, she said culture. Let's see, we can eat that. No, not green. No.
Well, you tapped on the okra, so keep up on the okra.
Right. What are you doing the okra though?
Yes. What is your take on like popular diets or restrictions such as plant-based, keto, or intermittent fasting? How to Eat to Live, OMAD, one meal a day. Are they safe during pregnancy?
See, you already answered my question for me. Right. Okay, no, well, look, I'll read a quote because I did come across when I was reflecting on that question, I was like, man, I know the Honorable Elijah Muhammad speaks directly into that, and I wanted to segue the answer to that question with what he said, right. So it wouldn't look like what Sister Sharifa said. Right. So, this comes from Book 2 of How to Eat to Live. And he says, Elijah Muhammad says, and do not take fasts while you are breastfeeding an infant or even while you are pregnant. If you like, you may eat once a day while pregnant or breastfeeding your baby, but you are not forced to do so. You should not go for 2 or 3 days without eating. And I was like, man, that's interesting because now we got to clear that word fasting. Because here he just said you can eat 1 meal a day, when you're pregnant. And we do have, I've come across some, mothers who have done that. Yes, but he said you're not forced to do that. You can eat at least, you can eat 2 meals. And when it comes to, and I'm going to address the other diets you mentioned, the keto and all that, but I want to start with that fasting one. Because that's very important because, as we're talking How to Eat to Live, fasting helps to prolong our lives. And so when we're pregnant, what dictates how often we should eat is going to be the necessity or the needs of the mother and that unborn baby. And really, in truth, it's really the needs of the mother because the baby, that fetus, it's going to get what it needs because it's going to take it from us. Mm-hmm. So while the baby's getting what it needs, hopefully, at the expense of us, but we're being deprived, that's going to lead to future ailments and challenges for us down the line. Yes. So that's when it becomes very, very important to pay attention to what our nutritional needs are while we're pregnant, because that helps us to determine if we need to eat once or if we need to eat twice. A lot of times, being that we're all mothers, we can feel that. Yeah. If you feel hungry when you're pregnant, don't ignore it. Yes, ma'am. I know. No, I'm doing woman. No, that's our body communicating to us, hey, you need to eat. Because I will be honest, personally, in my first pregnancy, because I wasn't used, especially that first trimester, I wasn't used to eating so often. I refused to eat. Yes. And my body was like, I'm gonna show you. So I couldn't, if I didn't eat and I got up, I would feel like a little nauseous and stuff. So purposely so that I wouldn't eat. I would stay in the bed till it was time to get up to eat. Yes, I mean, crazy as it sounds, but as soon as I would get up and eat, it would go away. And I was like, oh man, this, and then by the end of my third trimester, if I just felt a pull on the inside, not the physical pull of the baby, but like I don't know how, I know you could probably relate, but it was like a sensation in the womb, like I don't know, a vibratory feel, but it was a feel like, hey, you hungry? I'm like, man, I'm going to eat.
Yes, ma'am.
I call it the hunger pull. It was a hunger. You could literally feel it. And I was like, I got to eat. So I know I for sure, I know I ate at least twice a day, but 3 times a day. But I paid attention. Then by the time I was pregnant with our son, I just knew, man, whenever my body said eat, I just ate. But once again, because of that regularity of eating, my body was pulling on me all times of the day. But for sure, I knew I was eating at least 2 meals a day.
Yes, ma'am.
Did I answer all of that question? Because that was, oh no. Okay, let me finish the rest of it. But yeah, that stuck out to me because that's very, very important when it comes to fasting while pregnant. You mentioned the intermittent fasting, the OMAD. The best advice with that is listen to your body. Yes. Please listen to your body. And of course, normally when we do go and get blood work done. So keep an eye on vitamin and mineral levels, because that'll let us know if we need to consume more as well, especially when you see the numbers. Like I say, numbers don't lie.
No.
Now, as far as keto diets and all these other fad diets that are out there, the best diet, as we're taught, is a whole balanced diet. The keto diet, if I'm not mistaken, is a high fat, low carb diet. Now, when I will say this, when we're dealing with special situations in pregnancies, because you mentioned the preeclampsia, the gestational diabetes, and things like that, certain special dietary habits may become necessary just to get through a certain point, because that's really what those fad diets should be for anyway. Those should not be long-term lifestyle. Right. Because if you notice, even with the keto diet, when about the side effects and the fallbacks, it's like, okay, well, after so many months or whatever, this starts to happen. But why is that? Because it's not a natural diet.
No, ma'am.
But if you're dealing with someone who has a health challenge, and cutting carbs for a short period of time is going to help improve, then that might become a temporary solution. And then once that balance is reached, then yes, we get back onto our regular whole food, whole nutrition, nutrient dense diet. And then even with the keto diet, since we're talking about fats, any diet, especially during pregnancy, that's high in fats, can have a detrimental effect on the unborn child. So that's another thing that people have to be wary of. Even though I'm doing this keto for 30 days or whatever, the risk versus the benefits have to be weighed out. Because when we consume too much fat, I guarantee you most times the excess fat is not omega-3s, it's omega-6s. So now we're creating a situation where we're setting up not only ourselves, but our unborn child for chronic inflammation, because omega-6 coming from fats leads to inflammation. So you may feel better short term, but long term, after the baby's born, now both of you all have some type of health to deal with because of the decision to do a keto while I'm carrying. Same thing with protein. I think it's the Atkins diet, when it's high protein, low carb, but studies have shown that high protein diets, especially during pregnancy, can lead to babies being born, I don't want to use the word overweight, but larger than what the average size. So very, very heavy babies. So 10, 11, 12 pounds post-birth. So those are signs to show us that those type of dietary habits, they're not natural for us.
Yes, ma'am. Okay. So the other question I have for you is, for postpartum. So after you're done, with labor and you're done with your pregnancy, nutrition is often overlooked. So what key nutrients help with healing the mother and then also stimulate milk production?
Okay, great question. So, like you said, postpartum, a lot of times it does get overlooked, and it's easy. And then it depends, I mean, you're right. It gets overlooked in both situations, but when you're looking at a mother who's breastfeeding versus one who's not, it's easier to overlook in a mother who's not breastfeeding, because like, okay, the baby not sucking for me, I'm good, versus one who is like, okay, I know I'm breastfeeding. I know I still need to get something in to give to my child. And most times in those situations, that's what we're thinking. We're thinking, I need to take this in for my child, not I need to take this in for me and my child. Right. Right. So it's very key. I mean, it's just as important as preconception, pregnancy, and pregnancy is just as important, especially if we're breastfeeding, because when we're breastfeeding, we have to remember what we're taking in, we're passing on to the baby, And speaking on that, another plug-in. I don't know how many of you have seen Sister Nadine with nationsproduct.com has an excellent book on 100 reasons to nurse your baby. And in this book, she talks about, she gives scientific research quotes. She gives quotes from How to Eat to Live in terms of why it's so important that we breastfeed and the benefits not only that the baby gets, but also that the mother receives when we breastfeed our babies. So getting back to what you said, it's very critical. It's highly critical. Pretty much some of the same things we were doing while we were carrying should be some of the same things that we carry on after we give birth, So like, for example, we're talking about certain nutrients, iron. That iron level has to stay up, because as Black women, even those who aren't carrying, that's just a big issue for us as Black women. Iron deficiency, folate. We touched on that briefly. Folate is so important that it's recommended. Make sure we have higher levels prior to conceiving, because a lot of times when we're pregnant, most of our pregnancies are not planned, and folate deficiency can have an effect on the neurological system within the first 28 days of conception, and most times we don't even know we're pregnant.
Right. Yes, ma'am.
So that, that's, and then let's see, calcium. Oh my goodness, calcium is another one. We hear calcium is great for bone health, which really is. And that's, like you just asked this question about postpartum, having adequate calcium is so important, because after we have our babies and we get up in age, then we have to deal with menopause. And if we're not preparing our bodies properly now and having ideal health going forward, then we're going to have issues when we enter in that phase of our life. Iodine. Iodine is another important one, because most of us, especially in the nation, we don't use Morton's.
No, we don't.
So we have to have other sources where we can get iodine from. But what I always tell people is, going back to How to Eat to Live, those 3 main foods that we're taught to eat. Apparently, since those 3 foods extend our lives that long, that must mean every mineral or vitamin that we eat is in one of those 3.
Right.
We find it. We find iodine is in pure whole milk. I have to put emphasis on that, pure whole. We can't just throw the word milk out there, because milk in general, you're not gonna find that stuff, because pure whole milk is a living food. It's a whole food, but it has to be in that unadulterated state. Most milk on the market is not. Most milk on the market is adulterated. So we have to know what to look for. Let's see, folate. Find it in our navy bean. We can find all those B vitamins in our navy beans. As a matter of fact, even iron. I want to say, no, that was the protein, because I was sitting here thinking, like, 1 cup of navy beans provides so much and high nutrition when it comes to a lot of the vitamins and minerals we're talking about today. That's just 1 cup. I've grown up being an avid beans who look 1 cup. That's a tease for me. So, just imagine. Then you have your pure whole wheat bread. We know that whole wheat is definitely high in our B vitamins, but key thing here is it says pure whole wheat. Yes. Once again, that's a controversial discussion, because people just throw the word wheat.
Yes,
So, you know, when you say I can see, okay, no, we shouldn't be eating that. It's gluten sensitive. It makes you gain weight. Not pure whole wheat, and not if we prepare it the way that we're taught to prepare it.
Yes, ma'am.
And I do want to throw one more plug in. Watch this.
Yeah.
Naima had a beautiful advertisement on the screen with her Simply Naima's children's business. She also made some of the best bread you ever had, made properly, baked properly. So we're able to get those beneficial nutrients when we eat the foods prepared the way that we're taught they should be prepared. So we're still talking about postpartum. So yes, so I would say, yeah, those were, and look, let me see, maybe I came across it here. I think I had like 3 things. It's like here it says maternal milk has the nutritive function of promoting adequate postnatal growth and meeting the complete nutritional needs of infants. I was like, wow. And then it said with respect to sudden infant death syndrome, breastfeeding is associated with a 36% risk reduction. And it even talks in here about improving the immune system of the child. But what I also like about in this book, it has different quotes from nursing babies from 4 months, the benefits they get, nursing them for 6 months, nursing them from a year, because we know how to eat to live. We're taught that we can nurse our babies up to 2 years old. And the minister has even said it in no, he said that in the problems of relationships. He said you can nurse them up to 10 if they want to. He said, shoot, some of them still trying to nurse till 40.
Ooh, literally, okay. The husbands. Can I get a little?
But my point being is, when as mothers postpartum, when we nurse, of course, we're not only nourishing the baby, but we have to be found nourishing ourselves. And then too, the other part of that is when a baby nurses, whatever their nutritional needs are that they're lacking, there are signals in their saliva that go in through the tissue of the breast that goes to the brain of the mother. So it helps her body to chemically rebalance the needs, not only for the baby, but even for herself. Yes, so it's just, man, that in and of itself is just a whole beautiful mechanism, powerful all on its own.
Yes, ma'am. I'm glad that you mentioned iodine. Oh my goodness, because you think thyroid issues, and a lot of mothers, they don't know what's going on with them. They're like, oh, breastfeeding didn't help me lose weight. You may have some thyroid issues going on that you don't even know about.
Right.
You're blaming it on, oh, breastfeeding don't work, to help you lose weight. But literally, if you are getting rid of all of those calories by breastfeeding your child, then something should be coming out off of you. So definitely look into those levels, like you said, after pregnancy as well, and maintain those nutrients that you were having during pregnancy through your prenatal vitamins and other supplementation, to make sure you're getting those key vitamins that you need, especially calcium and vitamin D, because a lot of moms start losing teeth.
Yeah. Oh, and I'm glad you said that, because you just made me think of something as it relates to calcium. I'm going to speak on the calcium and then I'm come back to the iodine. Yes. But yes, like you just said, we, a lot of times we're not getting enough calcium in for ourselves and our baby. And most times it started before we conceived. We were already in that point of calcium deficiency. But here's another interesting fact. When babies nurse, or even when we're pregnant and they're absorbing or taking calcium from us, what happens is if we're deficient, of course, that means that it's going to start coming from our bones. But a lot of times too, going back to toxins, lead is also present in the bone. So when the baby is taking the excess calcium, now lead is starting to leach into the bloodstream. So if we're not properly detoxifying, then that too starts to affect the baby, but it starts to affect us because now we have this lead circulating throughout the system, which goes back to proper foods that help to chelate those things, like our dark leafy green vegetables and things like that. So it balances it out, but it also stresses the importance of making sure that calcium level doesn't get down to where it's deficient. If you keep it up, you don't have to worry about loosening those type of metal toxins that are there. And then once, the baby is weaned, then you can focus on properly, removing that from the body. But going back to the iodine, which ties right back into what we were talking about with how to eat to live in terms of that pure whole wheat bread. A lot of times, too, on the market, people purchase those breads that it uses what's called brominated flour. Bromine, we learned in chemistry, it's a halogen. In other words, it's in the same family as iodine. And so what happens is that if we're eating foods like a brominated bread, when it breaks down in the body, the thyroid recognizes the bromine. And instead of attaching iodine, it'll attach the bromine. So now the iodine can't even get there. So saying all that to say is the quality food that we eat is so important, and that's why How to Eat to Live is so critical in terms of following it precisely. Because if we follow it precisely, it allows us to navigate or get around a lot of these traps that are in the foods that we may not even recognize is there.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. You gave me something to think about with the lead.
Right.
So at what point would you think about detoxing your child from said lead exposure and or I guess the leaching from your breast milk?
I mean, that could honestly it depends on the type of chelators being used. Because there are gentle ones such as like modified citrus pectin is a good one to use. And then that one, it could pretty much, I would say when they become a toddler, if you're going to do a baby, even though it's gentle, because I'm not familiar with using it on babies or newborns. Now modified citrus pectin pretty much is, let's put it this way. Pectin it's a fiber or a polysaccharide that you find when you eat the skin of apples, pits of citrus fruits. The difference between pectin that's in that state versus modified citrus, keyword is it's modified, it's made smaller. The size is smaller so that it can actually get into the bloodstream and do some chelation. But like when we eat the apples and the skin of the apples, or we eat the pith of the citrus fruits, that too still does the same thing, but it does it only in the alimentary or the digestive tract, because the digestive tract starts in the mouth and ends at the anus. It does not enter into the bloodstream. But when you want to actually clear it directly out of the bloodstream, something like a modified citrus pectin is a very gentle one that's for both adults and children. Actually, activated charcoal is a good one too, and calcium bentonite clay, not the sodium.
Right.
Those are nice, gentle chelators that, like I said, once they're toddler stage, you can put a little bit in the water. Here, take it, or in the meantime, what people could do, especially with like a bentonite, is you can apply it topically and just pull from the skin that way.
Yes.
And then, of course, when you want to get into foods that help chelate, chlorophyll, that all ages, the mother can take the chlorophyll, the baby. Those are good ones to help naturally do it, and you don't really have to worry too much about the age when you're using something like a chlorophyll.
Yes, ma'am. Well, thank you for that. I'm going to ask a couple questions from the audience, and then we might have time for one more off of our list, and we're going to close off. So, seems like someone just put it on. Why does high blood pressure peak towards the end of pregnancy? What are some signs we can look for if this was never an issue before?
Okay. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know why it peaks during the end of pregnancy. That definitely would be a great question to ask Sister Nikele. But what I can ask though is, if it's spiking at the end, what is the blood pressure? What has the blood pressure been looking like leading up to the end of the pregnancy? Because that could be a telltale, that something needs to be addressed, So that would be my 2 cents on that first, because if more than likely, like I said, if there are telltale signs leading up to that, then it can be addressed ahead of time and that can be avoided.
Yes, ma'am. I'm going to make a quick comment. So typically, your blood pressure, if it does peak at the end of pregnancy, let's say a week prior to the end of conception, it would be because your body is getting ready to conceive. Not conceive, but to give birth. And then also, if you do actually have a preeclampsia, you are going to have signs like you asked way prior to the end of your pregnancy. They might not be as, I guess, as showing, but it is important for you to definitely document your own blood pressure during this time, not just wait on your appointment. So definitely be looking at that and see what is its baseline throughout your whole pregnancy. And that can kind of help you navigate the space of if I'm leaching into the preeclampsia stage. Also, after birth, you want to make sure that you're actually taking your blood pressure after birth, because a lot of us don't get the preeclampsia signs until after we've already had the baby. So it's important to look at that as well. Sister Felicia, I think that was. Yes. And then she said, what signs can we look for? Oh, okay. Sorry. She said, what signs can we look for? So headaches, dizziness, anything of that nature, you should be on the lookout for. Feeling faint. If you get up too fast and you feel faint, it could be your iron is too low, but you just want to make sure you're looking at your blood pressure on a daily basis at home if you do have access to a blood pressure machine. And then we could go to the next question. Sister Akila asked, what is the best rice to buy? Also, does it have a good source of folate?
I'm sorry, what was the second part?
Does it have a good source of folate?
Well, most rice is fortified, so it would have a good source. But once again, too, that how we prep it, because a lot of times when we wash our rice, and we're taught that we should wash our rice, it may leach a lot of that out. Now, when you say what's the best rice to buy, all I can tell you is what the Most Honorable Elijah Muhammad tells us in How to Eat to Live. Of course, a brown. He said we brown our rice, but we've had a consistent, I guess, I don't want to use the word habit, but what we normally purchase is long grain rice, and then we brown that rice. I know too on like the staple goods. I don't know if Michigan sells rice, the Michigan farm, because now I'm going to go into the different farms and where we get rice. They do have actual brown rice. I know that's in the staple goods, so we can also eat that one as well. Then, of course, when we go beyond that into the more fragrant rices and stuff, because now, we live in a society where we have access to all kinds of exotic and beautiful foods. None of those rices actually cook like the long grain. The other thing that I do too to kind of source what type of rice we should eat is also looking in the cookbooks from the cooks that the messenger or the minister have. And every time I look in those, the rice that they're using is a long grain rice.
Yes, ma'am. Well, praise be to Allah. I have one last question, and then we're going to go ahead and wrap it up. What are the long-term health benefits for moms and the rest of us who may not be moms yet, who would want to maintain optimal nutrition before, after, and beyond, for beyond weight management, really? What are some other health benefits?
Long life and longevity. But in truth, definitely that, but most importantly, prevention from future health challenges. Because yes. We talked about the iron. Oh my goodness. So things like that, it would help to prevent down the line having to come across dealing with anemia, dealing with unnecessary high blood pressure, dealing with unnecessary diabetes. Because diabetes is a very prevalent condition amongst us as to Black people in particular. But now that they're digging deeper into foundational causes, what they're finding, of course, insulin resistance, insulin sensitivity, and that's not always because of excess sugar. Right. That could be because, we were talking about the keto diet piece. That could just be from chronic inflammation. So eating foods that inflame the body can do that. But when we're nursing and we're focused on the proper nutrients, like I said, we're feeding that child, but that child is also feeding us. It's a beautiful chemical waltz. There you go.
Mm-hmm.
And so for our health down the line. But then, once, and I'll say this too, because this is something I didn't practice, and I'm dealing with and I'm overcoming some of the effects of that. Is when we're nursing, we should be feeding ourselves nutritionally. If we're going to nurse for 2 years, we need to be feeding ourselves nutritionally as if it was the first month of us nursing, because we have to remember that baby is still taking from us.
Yes,
So
ma'am.
one of the biggest ones I've seen is, like, we talk about the hair falling out, things that happen. They don't necessarily have to happen, but they're indications that the nutrient balance wasn't really there. But the baby did get what it needed. But if we want to prevent that, then we have to stay on top of making sure we have the adequate calcium, the adequate magnesium, the adequate iodine, the adequate iron, the adequate zinc. We have to make sure we're doing that. So in essence, what it really means is we should be practicing this aspect of how to eat to live all our lives. Really, that's really what it is. Just throughout the only difference is during that pregnancy and during that lactation period, we may have to increase the amounts, but it should still be the same. Say that to say, you mentioned how some women lose their teeth and things like that. I didn't lose a tooth, but I chipped one. It was years later, because some of this stuff shows up 3-4 years later, and we may not attribute it to, dang, you know what? My calcium levels were lower than what they should have been. And here we are 3-4 years later, something happens. I did experience the hair fall out. I was like, oh my God, what's happening? And sometimes, though, that because the hormones are balancing out, but guess what? If the hormones are balancing out and they have the adequate vitamins and nutrients that they needed to balance out, then that wouldn't necessarily happen. And so that's why it's long term. It's not, no, look, it's not long term, it's life term. It's life term.
Don't stop.
Right. You don't stop. You find ways to enhance it. Because like I said, 3-4 years later down the line, we can face health challenges based off of something we did not do correctly in that previous pregnancy, and not even make that connection.
Yes, ma'am. Absolutely.
Yeah. Oh, and last thing, because I keep saying I wanted to talk about that, is when it comes to our emotional well-being. Okay. Because, and that's where the B vitamins also play a big role. Having B vitamin deficiencies too can affect our mood, postpartum depression and things like that. But proper nutrition is so important to help prevent that. Now, am I going to say it'll prevent it 100%? Can't speak to that, but it could definitely lessen the blow. The blow of that. And in some people's cases, it can probably prevent it altogether. But we definitely, even though we're on the call talking about our nutritional well-being, the mental and the spiritual definitely has to go hand in hand with that as well.
Absolutely. I'm glad you mentioned that. I don't know. I think I was on Sister Akila's live on, what is that? TikTok. And they were talking about how, what Mama Dula, I think, was on there. Sister Devana was talking about how what you feed your child, mentally and spiritually while you're in conception, can have an effect later on the child, and you'll see it come out in the child. And I definitely can bear witness to that. Sorry that I do have to bear witness to that, but I'm glad I do see that now. Being in school and being under such extreme stress during that time, I do see it in my child. So yes, it is very important, guys, to watch what you feed yourself,
right,
and spiritually as well, guys. But that is all we have for you guys. We're gonna actually log off. I want to thank you so much, Sister Sharifa, for tuning in with us and allowing me to interview you in this space of Explore Motherhood, where we try to decrease the incidence of mortality in women and children of our community, in the Black community. So thank you so much for allowing me to have you in this space. If you have any closing remarks, you can go ahead and let us know, and then we're going to go.
I just want to thank you, beloved. I love the beautiful conversation. I felt the love. I love the love from you, from your guest. I just pray to Allah that He grants you all the greatest of success with the endeavor that you're on. I love your mission. And if there's any other way I can help out and participate, even if it's behind the scenes, let a sister know. I love this.
Yes, ma'am. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anybody else in the comments? Let me see what they said. Oh, they said, oh, this was such a beautiful cast. Thank you, Sister Lily. Okay, we're signing off, guys. I have a few last comments for you guys before we end, and we're gonna wrap up. So let me see if I can. Oh wait. Okay. So yes, last comments we have. Basically, be on the lookout for our Explore Motherhood t-shirts. Also, definitely review our podcast. Not our podcast, our blog post that we have on the website, exploremotherhood.org. We also have an upcoming event, Mama Meetup. It's going to be at a yoga studio. If you guys are interested, the link is in our bio here on YouTube, and you can access it, the registration as well as the ticket sales. We have, I think, 6 more spots available. So if you guys would like to join us and check us out and join community here at Explore Motherhood, definitely do so. Thank you all for tuning into our Birth Team Talks and our discussion of the importance of nutrition. I pray that you all learned something that resonated with you. And I extend thanks to Sister Sharifa for your expertise and guidance. I pray something was said from our amazing sister that you all can take from this, and it can help you along your journey of exploring motherhood. That is all we have for you guys. Love and peace. Definitely like and subscribe and give us a comment down below. Thank you.